Well, it's the end of the week, and this has been a really interesting week in terms of new information coming out about the extent to which your government spies on you. We told you a few days ago about a report by Wired magazine that outlined the details of a spy center being built in a small town called Bluffdale, Utah. It's called simply the Utah Data Center, but its purpose is to intercept, analyze, and store quite a bit of the world's communications from international, foreign, and domestic networks. The article states that the NSA has turned its surveillance apparatus on the U.S. and its citizens, including the eavesdropping of domestic phone calls and the intercepting of domestic emails. And this week, there was a rare occurrence. The NSA chief actually testified in front of Congress and took questions about the NSA ability, both legally and physically, to do that, to spy on U.S. citizens. While dancing around some of the facts, General Keith Alexander, for the most part, denied that this is happening at all. But there's evidence that shows otherwise, and many people who believe otherwise. One of those people is Amy Stepanovich, a legal counsel at the Electronic Privacy Information Center. Amy, let me ask you, just to the point, do you believe that the NSA is spying on citizens in the U.S.?
I do believe that the NSA is being very secretive about what it's doing. I believe that spying is probably involved, and I think that most of the information that we have ever received about the NSA has come from whistleblowers, and the whistleblowers at this point are saying that they're spying on domestic citizens. They're spying in the United States, and I think that information has to be weighed appropriately.
Back in the day, a couple decades ago, some of the things that they do, and you see this in TV shows and old movies, they'd tap the phones. They'd tap the landline so they could listen in, find out where the person was or what they were saying. And they'd also sometimes be able to get warrants to actually go through the people's mail. Well, fast forward to 2012, nobody I know has a landline other than my parents. We have cell phones now, and we have the ability to buy disposable cell phones. We communicate over email. How has the NSA, to your knowledge, been dealing with sort of this change, these advancements in technology, in terms of being able to do their job?
Well, the NSA, as you said, has just created this new data center. They're building this new data center in Utah. It's supposed to have unprecedented data capabilities. So they're able to take all of the electronic transmissions that are coming out of your mobile phone or your computer.
Out of my mobile phone?
Out of anybody's mobile phone.
Wow.
They have the capability. Now, the NSA is saying that they're not doing it for United States citizens unless we're communicating overseas or with foreign entities. But they'll have the ability to collect all of those communications. Now, this center in Utah isn't just a data center. They're not just collecting information. It's also a cryptography center. So they're actually looking at de-encrypting all of the data that comes out. So, for example, when you use Gmail, all your emails are encrypted by default. Google has given you this service and has allowed you to say, my communications are protected. Now, the NSA center is designed around building systems that will de-encrypt that data and remove any protection that you can put onto it. So it's not only gathering the information, it's doing its best to be able to look at any information that you've put protections on.
I mean, that just seems kind of crazy to me. Obviously, when you talk about security, there's often, it often goes hand in hand with secrecy. But we live in the United States of America. There's a Constitution. And this kind of stuff, that you're talking about, is not supposed to be happening other than these, and as you said, these whistleblowers have come forth and said, in fact, it is happening. How do they justify this?
Well, I don't know if the NSA has justified it other than just to deny it. And this is their modus operandi. For 5 years, Epic has been litigating against the NSA, trying to get information. We've been trying to get their cybersecurity authority that was given to them by George W. Bush. They have said no. They've said, we're not going to give you any information. We've tried to get, when Lieutenant General Alexander was actually first brought to the NSA, he testified in front of Congress. Many of his answers were kept hidden and classified. We have asked for those answers to be made public to the United States. This involves if he thinks that methods of domestic surveillance should be taking place and what those methods should be. So his answers on these very sensitive subjects have been kept hidden, and the NSA has operated continually under the shroud of non-transparency and secrecy, despite a commitment on President Obama's first day in office that this is going to be the most transparent administration ever. The NSA just doesn't think that applies to them.
Right. Well, I think a lot of branches of government don't. As we know, President Obama has also used the Espionage Act to charge several people, more people than all the other presidents combined. So that transparency thing hasn't exactly happened. You talked about the head of the NSA, speaking and testifying in front of Congress. This most recent testimony happened this week. I think it was on Tuesday. I want to play one question that came out of that hearing that was pretty interesting.
If Dick Cheney were elected president and wanted to detain and incessantly waterboard every American who sent an email making fun of his well-known hunting mishaps, what I'd like to know is, does the NSA have the technological capacity to identify those Cheney bashers based upon the content of their emails? Yes or no?
No.
So, as you say, denial, and General Alexander goes on to explain that assuming those emails were sent within the United States, that the NSA does not have the ability to do that. I don't know whether he's saying the legal ability or the physical or ability, the capability, that in the U.S., you know, the NSA, he says, would have to go through the FBI, you know, get a warrant, basically was deflecting responsibility. Talk a little bit about, you know, I guess read between the lines for us here.
Well, I can't help but watch that clip and reminisce about a scenario not too long ago when George W. Bush stood up and said they were not wiretapping phones of American citizens. And it wasn't too long after that that the NSA's warrantless wiretapping program was revealed by a whistleblower. And so you wonder, and with the NSA's just frequent track record of hiding information, either if Lieutenant Alexander is choosing his words very carefully, which some have proposed, that maybe they can't collect it within the United States, but they're using satellites to collect this information, and that's the collection point, and then it's being transmitted into the United States for process, or if he's just lying outright, which has happened in the past as well.
Well, we've talked to people here who say that there's also sort of the element of language that can be used, that intercept, that spy to us might mean something different than the actual language given and outlined at the National Security Administration. Let me talk about something that happened this week. I mean, certainly this week, a lot of stuff going on. This was just yesterday. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder just basically gave the National Counterterrorism Center the license to retain Americans' data for up to 5 years. Now, these are not just people who have, you know, that they've gotten warrants to look into because they thought they were suspected of terrorism. These are people who have no ties, have no suspects of being, are not suspected of being tied to terrorism. They can hold on to that information for 5 years. What was the purpose of giving that license?
Well, that license is actually supposed to make Americans feel more secure. It's supposed to gather all this information, and they think by having a bunch of information and being able to retain it and reference it, that it's making the country safer. However, you find that when you have information in one place stored for a very long period of time, it actually makes that information less secure because it gives criminals and people who want to use that for bad methods a place to go. So it's actually making people less secure when it's trying to make people safer, which I think we all would agree is not a good thing.
Interesting. Amy Stepanovich, a legal counsel at the Electronic Privacy Information Center. Appreciate your insight on this. There's kind of a tangled web of things to go through here when it comes to safety and security in the U.S.